Hi, Liz.
Hi, Heather.
It's really interesting to interview somebody you know so well, because I have such a depth of understanding of the various layers of you and such a deep level of respect as well. And at the same time, as I'm going through the questions that I'm going to ask you, I'm thinking, wow, there are actually things that I don't know. And I'm very much looking forward not only to learning a bit more, um, but to being a bit more educated about chair yoga. And having said that, when I read your new book, that was an education in itself. So, just for everybody that doesn't know you yet, and how incredibly awesome you are, a little bit about your bio. So, Liz is the founder of Accessible Chair Yoga, and she is a leading expert on chair yoga in the UK. She came to yoga in her 50s following serious illness and injury. And through yoga, her recovery became a transformation. But she was left with a question: how to bring the restorative practice of yoga to people for whom the mat is a barrier. And I think, Liz, you and I find parity in how do you bring yoga to people that would otherwise struggle? And you know, for me, that it's very much been mental health, right?
Yes.
Now, there's more. She found her answer in the Lakshmi Voelker chair yoga. And since training with Lakshmi, she's taught chair yoga to people with a huge range of abilities, including people who are totally new to yoga, people with Parkinson's, MS, stroke, cancer, other conditions, as well as those with dementia, learning disabilities, and also their carers. So looking at sort of a systemic approach. And her dream is to train a community of chair yoga teachers to bring yoga to care homes across the United Kingdom. And that dream she shares with me as well. I would love to see that further dissemination. As a yoga teacher, as a teacher trainer, and as a yoga therapist, she trained with the Minded Institute. She takes alignment-based holistic approaches to what she's doing, and she's really engaging and effective. And I remember the first time, Liz, I watched you teach, and I was just like, wow. Also, in collaboration with the University of Hertfordshire, she completed research studies on yoga in care homes and mindfulness for Parkinson's, and she lectures at the Minded Institute. And it seems like the things she lectures on keep growing because she's so fantastic at making topics accessible and doing deep dives at the same time. So she's lecturing on Parkinson's, on dementia, on osteoporosis, and I think the list is going to keep growing. She is also a regular facilitator on Jivana Heyman's Accessible Yoga course. She has her 200-hour yoga teacher training. That's probably obvious. She also has 300-hour advanced yoga teacher training course, which she did in 2019. And she qualified with the Minded Institute in 2021, but it's a long program, so she began it a few years before that. And she has lots of other qualifications, like a postgraduate degree in oncology yoga diploma. She's trained with True Yoga on postgraduate back pain and their foundation certificate course. She has a certificate in accessible yoga, and she continues to do her work in care homes online. She provides support for carers as well. And she was the person who actually, when I said we really need chair yoga training for yoga therapists because that makes yoga therapy more accessible, developed a course for the Minded Institute. And so I really wanted an opportunity to share some of her insights with people that might want to do her course or just want to know more about chair yoga for themselves and also professionally. So, Liz, what first attracted you to chair yoga and how has it impacted your life?
So thank you, Heather. So the first thing was that my original yoga teacher had asked me to help her set up a social enterprise to offer yoga to people not as athletic as most of the yoga that's on offer. And I said to her, well, I'm interested, but I don't know why yoga works. So that's what led me to do the training in the first place. And when
But
I
why did
finished,
you wait? Wait, just to go back. No, but why did you start chair yoga?
Well, it's because I
Oh,
didn't,
sorry.
I have to go through here to get to
Okay.
there.
Oh,
So
sorry. Okay.
the first group of people that I taught were these young women at a nursery, because it's just down the bottom of my road, and I was sort of begged to teach there by one of my friends, and they were teaching moms, and it's the staff. The way they were these young women were so stiff, they had trouble getting up on off the floor, taking care of little children. So, and yoga helped them like it helped me. And at the time, I was doing lots of volunteer work, and we did an action in a care home. And I went to the care home, and I thought, gosh, the carers, the staff here, and the residents could use this. And I had learned about this chair yoga in my 200-hour training. The woman who did had done the training. So I asked the care home, could I come along and teach it? And they said, sure. So a year later, because it took me a while to do the training, I found out that this was great training. And I then trained with Lakshmi online. And then I went back to start doing it. My first class, my first test was to do it on a chair. I mean, in a care home, there are people who can stand up and walk, but what I found was that when you do chair yoga, everybody's on an equal playing field. So those people who can't stand up from a chair, people who can't get up and down off the floor, would often feel like they're not as good. Yoga is mostly taught to achieve a sort of pose in a certain shape. And when you do chair yoga, and particularly when you do it with a Lakshmi Voelker method, the idea is that you start with the person where they are, and you grow the movements from there. And it has a very yoga therapeutic approach. And that's what first, and I love that. I loved how these people in chair home, who actually, by the way, they called it what I think was lovingly armchair yoga. I did the trial. I taught, I think, twice a week for about 2 months. And we did these sort of questionnaires. And at the end of it, they all were so enthusiastic about it. And one of the big things that the management said to me at the care home was, they said, after you do this, everyone is so calm. The whole care home is so calm. And I felt that I could bring yoga to people. Many of them had never done it before. Actually, in this particular care home, I did have one student who had Parkinson's and some dementia, but she'd done yoga before. Like, she's doing very advanced movements because her body could do that. But it was in the same room as someone who'd never done yoga before and had a very low mobility, but also felt like the meditations were amazing. And you could see bliss on her face at the end of the practice. So it's so inclusive to be able to give yoga to people. And particularly, it helped me so much. I wanted to bring it to people that especially would think, well, yoga, I would never think of doing it.
And I know that the structure has changed for the accessible yoga movement started by Jivana Heyman, but you were the European coordinator for accessible yoga. So it sounds like the way that you are offering chair yoga. I mean, we would think of chair yoga in general as being a more accessible form, but it sounds like the way that you are offering it is uniquely accessible. And I wondered if you could add anything to clarify those distinctions. And you said as well, that the Lakshmi Voelker method really builds on where a person's at. But are there any particular things that make this method specifically accessible?
Okay, so when you do training for the basic Lakshmi Voelker Yoga method, this is based on understanding the internal embodiment of how the poses feel to you and how the movements feel, and the techniques work more from an internal basis. There isn't per se, in terms of assessing, those are skills that are learned later on. Once, for instance, in this new course that I've developed, it's for yoga therapists, because that's where you learn the inquiry skills and the assessment skills that take you into that level, that depth. So
just to be clear, so what you're saying is, first in the Lakshmi method, you're really feeling it in your own body. And that embodiment, we call that interoception often, right? Allows you to have a better sense of somebody else. And then when you're watching somebody, you are able to sense into what they might need. You can inquire with them. And one of the things that what you were saying, which I think is really exciting about the second part of the yoga chair training that you offer, which is yoga therapy, is that you actually learn physical assessment because yoga therapists already have that. And so when you're choosing movements, it's not just based on felt sense, but also based on specific principles that yoga therapists learn. Would that be right
Yes.
in saying that?
Yes. Thank you for
Yeah.
doing that so well.
Well, I'm just kind of like, looking at it from the outside and being really impressed with having experienced with you what it's been like to get me to feel a particular position. Before I met you, I thought, okay, chair yoga is just taking poses and putting them on the chair. And I remember sitting with you one day and we were doing a photo shoot. And you said, no, no, that's not what it is. You need to feel almost the same kind of sensations that you would feel on a mat. And that's based on my own body and level of flexibility as on the chair. So you took me into a down dog that didn't have my hands at the back of the chair and my back straight with my legs straight, which is what I've always used in chair yoga. And you had me sit there and really press my arms into the air and my feet. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much work. And so this feels exactly like downward dog on the mat. I can't hold this for a long period of time. The only difference is I don't have the contact with the floor. And that really impressed me. And what you made sure was to understand what I was capable of feeling on the floor. And I know that that won't be all of your clients, but that highlighted something for me. And you gave me the same experience in a chair. And I was like, whoa, chair yoga can be hard.
I always say, because this is something, the impression is that chair yoga is just gentle and you just for people who are older. But listen, you can really sweat on a chair if you want to. We can make you sweat in chair yoga. But so it's nice for people with injuries as well, because there are people who get injured. I myself, when I was doing the training, I tore the meniscus in my knee doing the extreme sport we call hot yoga, coming up from toe stand, and I couldn't do my mat yoga, but I was on the chair and I could keep doing yoga, which is amazing for people who are quite move a lot to be able to keep moving and do yoga on a chair.
Yeah, so there's that other side. And we've talked about this as well. I've brought chair yoga into Parliament, and that's sort of a different animal. That's where people didn't want to do intensive postures, even if they had the capacity to do it, right? There's really mixed levels. But what was very attractive about it was something that could be done in a corporate environment where people didn't want to be seen as feeling awkward and really stretch their body, build some strength, relax their system. And we had really good uptake. So there's all these different layers. And I think that speaks again to the accessibility piece. It can build strength. It can be accessible for people that cannot move as much. And also, if people don't want to get on a mat for whatever reason in a corporate environment, it's also something that they can do like in their lunch break. Um, When I read your book, Get Fit Where You Sit, I was so impressed, Liz. Do you want to hold up the book so they can all see it? Yeah. I review a lot of books on yoga therapy and on yoga. I'm asked to do it a lot. And, you try and write something nice. When I read yours, I was so impressed. It's one of my favorite books I've ever had to review. And I'm not saying that to sell it, but buy her book because it's amazing. Um, Because what you did was you took all of the limbs of yoga and you made them accessible. And we try to do that in yoga therapy, but your unique slant on it was special. And I wonder if you can speak any more to that. What it's like to think of accessible chair yoga from more than just asana.
Well, this is where I will speak about Lakshmi, because she's a yogi from the age of 18 back in the 60s. So she's somebody who grew up with yoga and just it became all part of her DNA deep into her cells. And she comes from Kripalu, one of the places, which is a very well-known yoga center in America, which, by the way, means compassionate. And that's why she didn't realize herself, she talked about principles of yoga, but she didn't realize that this was a principle because she just is it. So I've been able to hopefully articulate a few more of the principles. And the 8 limbs that's what she is. That's where they come from. She lives them. She's lived them for decades as part of her life. And so when she created the chair yoga program from the start, that was part of it. So just completely ingrained in the entire method. And what we did when we wrote the book is that I suggested to her that not only just mention the 8 limbs, but let's talk about them in a more articulated way throughout different ways. So we talk about them with meditation, for instance, so that you can learn, you can see that these principles, the yamas and niyamas in particular, she talks about the yamas and niyamas being part of her chair, like the legs of her chair, they're like her support. So it's really beautiful. And it's a way for us to, we feel, bring the true essence of yoga. It's not lost. When you do yoga, you aren't losing anything or doing lesser yoga because you're doing it on a chair.
And maybe because you are making it accessible and you are really considering the nature of the individual. I don't want to say you're doing more, but you're adding another layer. And it's so beautiful for you to honor Lakshmi, but I also want you to be given credit because I've seen your writing and I saw you really come through that as well. There is a special way that you understand the limbs of yoga that comes across that was inspired by her. Now, you and I could probably talk about this for another hour, but we agreed the interview would only be so long. It would be great if you could actually demonstrate a chair yoga posture and maybe some variations, which either yoga professionals or people that just want to learn a little bit about chair yoga for themselves can practice. So could you do that for us?
Of course. And I thought maybe I would just mention it as part of the book as well, because there's one particular pose, which is one of my favorites. So it's tree pose, which many of us love. And just to show you in the book, we've got 40 poses and it outlines what we've talked about, these levels of flexibility. And it gives 3 options for tree pose, showing the mat pose. So you know where it's come from for these options that are in here. So then just to go back, we also use tree pose to explain there aren't just 3 options. I mean, in the book, you only have so many examples that you can give. So we just stuck with 3, but we make a point earlier that it's really multiple levels of flexibility. And we show tree pose in like 6 different versions. And also we show tree pose where what we call mix and match, which I'll show you on the chair in a minute. And I just want to read one little thing, because to me, this is partly embodies what our chair yoga is all about and how the levels of flexibility anyway, I think I'll just read it out to you. Practice compassion on the chair. Levels of flexibility allow us to choose what works for us on any given day. It's not about pushing ourselves into what we believe we can do or should be able to do if our body is telling us otherwise. It's about recognizing and accepting that each day, each week, each month, each year may be different, giving each of us permission to do yoga our own personal way. And so that's just one little thing I wanted to read. And I mention this too because the other reason I feel so passionate about it is I happen to being a yoga-minded graduate, a Mind Institute graduate. We're always looking up the science, right? So I did check the recent statistics. One reason why I feel so passionate about this is that the World Health Organization says that by 2030, 1 in 6 people in the world will be age 60 or over. And by 2050, the world's population of 60 plus will be going from 1 billion, that's now in 2020, to 2 billion. It's going to double. So people need, more and more people want to keep doing yoga, or yoga can be beneficial to them. So the chair is always going to be accessible for most people. So.
And it will keep people strong and well and able. And the other thing is that you can mix chair yoga with mat yoga as well, so that people have a broader range of capacity. Like this particular thing, maybe a person can't do on the mat and they want to do on the chair, or this particular thing, they find that their body stretches more, strength is built more on the chair, and then they come down to the mat. Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely true. And we work on that in the second part of the course that I've developed for the Mind Institute, where we talk a lot more about that and how you can do that sort of thing. So mix and match those, the mat and the floor and the wall and any position you want
And
to
the
do.
ceiling.
Yeah.
If you take Liz's course, you'll learn how to fly. No. Okay.
So I'm going to show you tree pose now.
Yeah.
I'm going to put my
Okay.
camera down so you can
Okay.
see me. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, what I'm gonna do is spotlight you so that
Oh,
it'll be easier for everybody to see you.
just make sure.
Oh, I can't spotlight you because there are only two of us in the room. It doesn't allow that. I'm pinning you, but I'm not sure how that's gonna show up. Well, we'll see.
Okay, as long as you can see me, what I'm doing, that's the main thing. Okay, so what I like to do, what we do first when we come into our chair is we set our foundation. And the foundational pose is sitting mounted, which so you can get yourself into good postural alignment. I tend to take off my shoes on the chair, but I always give people a choice. I happen to have my toe socks on today, so a little bit of color for my feet. A lot of my students in care homes particularly like a little bit of color. So we come into postural alignment, getting our knees aligned with our hips, and we raise our torso so that we can bring some space here to be able to breathe, and space in the back so that we can bring lengthen our spine. So that's helping for healthy spine and healthy breathing. Shoulders up, back and down. And then we come and we usually pause before we start and come into, take a few breaths to come in before we start doing the practice. So I'm going to show you tree pose on the chair. So we normally set up the lower body first, because this again is our foundation. And I may say to someone, they might have their feet on a footrest on a wheelchair, or if not, it doesn't matter. Just open one hip up. We're going to start on the left side. I'm not mirroring. And offer, this is one option for the lower body. And you'll see here and maybe feel here that some of the aspects of tree you can get by just opening up one hip on the chair, leaving the other leg as its firm foundation in a sitting mountain pose. Now then I would say to students, and I'll say to you, if you like another option, would you like to consider bringing your left foot next to your right foot? So kind of hugging the feet a little bit there. So that's another option that you can offer. And you can stay there if you wish, or if you want to, you can maybe cross the ankle. So you're crossing your left ankle over your right. And we do have
through all of this, you're getting some hip opening, which is really important. Yeah, okay.
Opening, and depending on how open your hips are, or whatever you have, we do have a saying, one of our principles is, if you feel a pinch, go back an inch. So we encourage people to do what works for their body. So this is one, and we do have a spicy option, which is when we hinge forward, you can bring your leg up and coming up on just above the knee, not on the knee, but on the thigh, bringing the toes, so flexing the foot towards the knee. And this is you need quite open hips for this. So many of my students, I will say, but I may have a class, for instance, in a care home, I might have the grandchildren and the children in there as well. And some of them could do this, but I could say, everybody choose your option. So everyone chooses what works for their body, and they all do that in the same class. So we've got our lower body option. I'm going to choose this one today. And we may start just having our hands together, a palm on top of the other in the lap. And then maybe we'd like to consider putting our palms together in front of the heart. And maybe if you want to, you can leave your hands anywhere you wish. Maybe you'd like to raise them up, and you can stop anywhere you wish. So depending upon your shoulders, your arms, where you are, you can raise your arms up over your heads and sit up tall. And we all choose where you want your hands. You can keep them down, you can keep them up, and we're going to take 3 breaths. Breathing in through the nose if that's available to you, or if not, the mouth is absolutely fine. And we notice how we feel, seeing if you feel any stretching or anything you wish. And you can always go back to any other option that we've shown. And breathe here. And then when we exhale out, we have our palms out and we sway in the wind. So we like sometimes to bring in a little bit of playfulness into our chair yoga. Everybody's teacher is a different style. And then we can bring our palms back together and down. And then we come back to sitting mountain. Then we do the other side, because you know yoga, you do both sides to make sure for balance. So you can
Of
also,
course.
yes, go ahead. Oh,
No, I
yeah.
just said of course.
Oh, yes. And so one other thing, so this was showing you a lot about hip opening and, let's say, stretching up the arms, but you can choose any benefit that you have for the mat pose to focus on.
And so I think also what's interesting about this is, like you said, you can really focus on that lifting of the arms and the stretching of the spine, the opening of the hip, them all together. And also, you could technically come off the chair and use the chair as a prop and a support. So there's just so many things in terms of, are you actually working more on just the balancing aspect of it with support? And that is something that I love so much about your methodology. Do you want to come a little bit closer so I can see you again? um, that that you have taught me, which is chair yoga is really about understanding what is the benefit that you're trying to derive from this pose. You can derive all the benefits of the mat, or if that isn't possible for somebody, you can derive some of them and focus the attention in on those particular aspects. So, yeah, Liz, it was really lovely to chat with you, to see you demonstrate as well. I keep trying to get to your course myself. I really do want to do it. And just to remind everybody that if you are not a yoga teacher, but you're a carer, a healthcare professional, and you're interested in chair yoga, Liz offers this awesome 1-day course in basic yoga techniques. And if you do that, you are then allowed to enter the level 1 of her chair yoga teacher training. And so you would have more in your toolkit, whether it was to work with clients or to work with other people in your life. And some individuals just do it for themselves as well. Yeah. Is there anything you want to say before we end?
Well, thank you so much, Heather. I feel really honored to have been asked to do this interview with you. And I really, more people just come and train, because we need more chair yoga teachers. I'm looking forward to more people coming along. And the book will, of course, bring it to more people as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Namaste.
Namaste.